Magic Treehouse. Late Lunch with Llamas. Written by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 7. Now or Never. "Are you sure that's Kriya?" said Jack. "Yes, she's the only silver one. She's wearing a bell. And she's tiny," said Annie. Right, said Jack. "But we can't just charge over there and grab her. We need to make a plan." "Make it fast," said Annie. "She looks tired. She can't keep up with the big llamas." "I know, but look, they've stopped," said Jack. "Something's going on." The two royal guards had stopped on the lowest level of the plaza. Leaving the animals, the guards climbed up to the highest level. They entered a gate that led to the largest building on the plaza. "The Royal Palace," said Jack, remembering their map. A moment later, the two men returned. 4 others followed them. They also carried spears and wore helmets with feathers. "More guards," said Annie. The men were guarding a tall man who walked behind them. The man wore a cape, covered with glittering jewels. Gold earrings hung from his ears. His headdress was made of coils of gold with gold feathers that looked like rays of sunlight. All the people in the plaza stopped what they were doing. Everyone stared at the glittering golden man. "Who is he?" whispered Jack. "Check the book," whispered Annie. Jack pulled out their guide. He quickly found a painting that showed a man wearing the same clothes and headdress. He and Annie read together. "Emperor Pachacuti ruled the Inca Empire from 1438 to 1471. The fierce emperor was called Earthshaker because he created the largest empire in South America. He also founded the secret city of Machu Picchu." "I get it," whispered Annie. "They took the baby llama as a gift for Earthshaker. We have to get her back before they give her to him." "Hold on, wait," said Jack. "We need a plan." "No, now's the time," said Annie. "He and his guards aren't paying attention to her. It's now or never. That's the plan." Before Jack could stop her, Annie stepped out from their hiding place. "Annie," he whispered. Annie started walking toward the llamas. Jack looked around. No one seemed to notice Annie. All eyes were on Emperor Pachacuti. High on the plaza, the emperor and his men were talking. They too seemed unaware of Annie heading toward the llamas. Annie walked casually to the little silver llama at the end of the line. She patted Kriya's head and whispered in her ear. Then she tried to untie her. But she seemed to have trouble with the knot. "She's taking too long," Jack thought frantically. He had to help her. Jack stepped out from his hiding place and headed toward Annie and Kriya. He was terrified, but he tried to walk calmly. Before he even got close, the baby llama broke free from the rope. She started sprinting across the plaza. She was heading away from Jack. "Get her, Jack!" Annie cried. People in the plaza laughed and pointed at Kriya. Some Inca children started running after her. Jack charged toward the baby llama too. He reached her first. He grabbed her and wrapped his arms around her fuzzy silver fur. Annie caught up to them. She held Kriya's little head and looked into her eyes. "It's okay," Annie said breathlessly. "It's okay. We're taking you home to Topa." The baby llama nuzzled Annie's hand. Before Annie and Jack could whisk her away, a man shouted, "Thieves!" Jack turned and saw 2 royal guards hurrying toward them. Their spears were raised. "We have to take her back home to her true owner," Annie said boldly. She belongs to our friend Topa. The guards reached for the llama. Halt! Someone shouted. The royal guards backed off. Behind them, Emperor Pachacuti was striding toward Jack and Annie. Under his gold headdress, he had jet black hair, dark eyes, and a rugged face. Who are you? He said, glaring at them. I'm Annie, and he's my brother Jack, Annie said. And this baby llama is Kriya. She belongs to our friend Topa. He is an orphan. He takes care of her like she is family. Jack glanced at the guards. He didn't want to make them angrier. She got lost on Young Mountain, he said. But these two nice guards must have found her, said Annie. She smiled at the men who had taken Kriya. We're happy to take her off their hands now and return her to Topa. The Emperor stared coldly at the baby llama. Kriya stared back with bright, wide eyes. The llama's fearless gaze reminded Jack of Annie. I like this small animal. Her color is unusual, said the Emperor. I have none like her. She will stay. Oh no, thought Jack. What now? I'm sorry, said Annie. But I'm afraid she doesn't want to stay here. She thinks it's pretty, and she thinks you're really great. But she wants to go home to the little boy who loves her. That's right, Jack said nervously. That's what she wants. How do you know what this animal wants? The Emperor said. Well, Jack didn't know what to say. I got this, Annie whispered to him. She looked at the Emperor. We know because she told me. The Emperor looked amused. What? This llama talks to you? Yes, she does, said Annie. Oh no, this won't work, thought Jack. Annie looked at Jack. She talks, right? Under her breath, she repeated their rhyme. All the legends will help you. Suddenly, Jack remembered words from their guide. Inca legend says that in early times, llamas could talk. Yes, she talks to Annie, Jack said. The royal guards laughed. The onlookers nearby murmured in low, excited voices. Show us, the Emperor ordered. Show us all how this little llama speaks. Chapter 8. Ancient Magic. Jack held his breath. No problem, said Annie. She knelt beside Kriya and looked into her eyes. The baby llama fluttered her long eyelashes. What do you want to do, Kriya? Annie asked her. Then Annie put her ear close to Kriya's mouth. She nodded as if the llama were whispering back to her. Oh no, he'll never fall for that, Jack thought. Annie looked up at the Emperor. She says she would like to go home. The Emperor scowled. Then he broke into laughter. I see, you are playing a children's game, he said. You and your brother must leave now. I will keep the llama. Oh, wait, please, said Annie. I'll tell her to talk louder. Annie, said Jack. Shh, she said. She whispered again in Kriya's ear. Then she stared for a long moment into the huge eyes of the baby llama. Kriya stared back at Annie with an alert gaze. Then the baby llama began to speak. Topa, Kriya said in a tiny voice. Go back to Topa. Jack couldn't believe it. He laughed out loud. How did Annie do that? How did Kriya speak? The Emperor gasped and stared in amazement at the small silver llama. A hush came over the crowd. The guards and the people in the plaza watched with wonder. Topa, Kriya said again. Go back to Topa. Hear that? Said Annie. Topa is the boy who cares for her. She wants to go back to him. You heard her, right? Annie turned back to Kriya. Say it again. Say it louder. Go back to Topa now, Kriya said clearly and loudly. The Emperor looked stunned. Then his face softened. I understand she loves the boy, he said. Her great feelings for him gave her the power of speech. Right, said Annie. And Topa loves her, too. She is his whole world. Emperor Pachacudi nodded. You must take her back to him, he said. Really? Said Jack. Yes. The Emperor looked around at his guards and the people watching. The miracle llama has spoken. Her wishes must be honored. Thank you, said Jack and Annie. Come, Kriya, let's go home to Topa, said Annie. The baby llama took halting steps. The crowd silently parted to let Jack, Annie, and Kriya pass. Jack looked straight ahead. He didn't dare glance back. He was afraid the Emperor might change his mind. Can't take her through the forest? Jack said quietly to Annie. Go the way she came up, the old trail. It was marked in the map. Got it, Annie whispered. That way, through the arch, said Jack. Walk faster. Jack and Annie walked faster. The silver llama took springy little steps beside them. She seemed to know she was going home. Jack led the way to the stone arch. Guards stood on either side. They stared in awe at Kriya as she pranced through. On the other side of the arch, a rocky path led through the brush. Starting down the trail, Jack breathed more calmly. How did she do that? He asked. How did you make her talk? What happened? I remembered our rhyme, said Annie. And the words in the book about old legends that said llamas could speak. I believed it could be true. And Kriya believed it too. And she talked. Simple. Not simple, said Jack with a grin. Impossible. Annie, Jack, and Kriya moved quickly down the winding trail. When they rounded a corner, Jack gasped and stopped. They could see the long path ahead. The trail ran along the very edge of the mountain. Far below, the river raged between Old Mountain and Young Mountain. Oh no, Jack said. The trail looks just as dangerous as the bridge. It's okay, Annie said. We got this. Just remember, don't look down. Jack forced himself to look away from the steep drop-off. Okay, he said. We have to go single file. Follow me with Kriya between us. No problem, said Annie. Don't worry about us. Stay close to the side of the mountain. Jack led the way as they started down the stone path. He could hear the soft click of Kriya's hooves behind him and the sound of her bell. He forced himself to look straight ahead as he, Annie, and Kriya carefully wound their way down the trail. A soft wind blew against the mountainside. Look, Jack, said Annie. I can't. Don't ask me to look at anything, he said. But it's good news, said Annie. I see the bridge. It's not far. Cool, said Jack. The bridge was good news. And bad news. How would they cross it with the llama? How had the guards done it? Oh, no, I don't believe it. Jack, look, said Annie. I said I can't, said Jack. No, not down. Look up at the sky, said Annie. Jack looked up. Oh, whoa, he whispered. Condors,